I join you today as a former development director at a local Kansas City nonprofit. I have been in the seat in which some of you are currently sitting. I know the day in, day out of nonprofit ministry, and I know it can be equal parts challenging and rewarding. What I loved most about the development work I did is seeing God's people get to connect with the work He's doing in our community. Ministry workers get the privilege to see the work day in and day out, but donors provide the means for it to happen. And you, as development officers, advancement coordinators, executive directors, and presidents, often get to see that connection happen. I'm honored to introduce you today to our webinar guest, Tim Smith. He has over 30 years of experience in administration, management, and fund development for nonprofits. He has held a variety of roles in executive leadership for mega-sized organizations and is widely recognized as a leading authority in these fields. His book, Donors Are People Too, is a wonderful resource for nonprofits. Currently, he serves as a consultant and advisor to nonprofit organizations across the United States. Tim has a heart for development and helping match resources with purpose. Before I hand this webinar over to Tim today, let me review a couple of logistical details. First, today our goal is to make this a conversation. Tim and I will be talking throughout the next hour, and we want to hear from you. Please ask questions as you have them. When you're looking at your screen, you'll see the Q&A tab in the bottom toolbar. Just type in your question as you have it. As much as we are able, we will address those questions as we go. We also plan to address questions at the end. However, if you don't get an answer to your question, know that we are capturing it and we will address it after the webinar concludes. We will distribute those answers to you as quickly as we can. We are also offering a few of Tim's books, Donors Are People Too, to those asking questions today. So that's your incentive to engage in this conversation. We will draw those names randomly at the conclusion of the webinar and be sure to get you your book. We want this information to be meaningful and applicable to you. Okay, I think that covers the logistics. We're ready to get started. Welcome, Tim. We're excited to learn from you this morning.
Well, thanks, Kristen. It is a delight to be here at the Signatory today, and I'm looking forward to having this conversation with everybody as we can share a little bit about building a major donor program. So I'm looking forward to engaging with the audience here today. And I thought maybe I'd just start with talking a little bit about how I got started, because I find that most people that are in the fundraising space, they are not necessarily a person who went off to college, went off to graduate school, and came away with hey, I wanted to be in fundraising. Hey, I wanted to do a degree in fundraising. There are a few colleges and master's programs today that are being offered in that. But when I came up, it was really, I wanted to do good. I wanted to work for a nonprofit. I wanted to make a difference in the world of fundraising, and or not necessarily in fundraising, but I just wanted to make a difference in the world. And I was challenged to do fundraising as a part of that process. And for me, it came in a very strange way. I was on staff of a large local charity here in Kansas City many, many years ago, fresh out of high school, going to college part-time, working part-time. And our director came bounding into the room. He was a man of great presence. And all of us young guys, I was 19 years old at the time. And he said, listen, we are in financial straits right now. We need all of you guys to get out there and raise some money. Now, get out there. This is my training. He says, get out there, knock on doors, and don't come back here with less than $1,000. That was my first, that was what we would have called a webinar on fundraising.
Right. Not the training that we'd like to provide today.
Exactly. And so, and I went out and I did that, and I knocked on a few doors and I talked to some people. I had a few doors slammed in my face, but I realized that, hey, this is not a bad way to to live my life. I just felt like sharing about a great cause, sharing about great opportunities, and connecting people who can help see that opportunity become a reality was a really fun thing. And that's how I started, and I've never looked back. I've been in this business my whole life, and working for everywhere from having to find the first donor of an organization, the first person to call on, the first phone number to dial, to I've been to the point of being blessed to work for some of the larger, more high profile faith nonprofits in this country. And so I feel very privileged to do that. And I just believe it's a calling. I love fundraising. I love the fact that I get to do that every day. Okay. It's not something that I have just settled for. Now, if my parents were alive, they would probably ask me a question like, gee, didn't you ever find a legitimate job? You never joined the family business. You never, you just seem to stay in this nonprofit space. But I personally, I just feel very passionate about doing what I do. And
don't you think that's really, that's a matter of perspective, because this really is a privilege to be able to work in this capacity in this ministry world versus a burden. It's not a burden.
Well, exactly. And I don't believe that fundraising is for everyone. I don't think that it's easy. I think the people that believe fundraising is easy are people that look at fundraising from the outside. And they don't really live it every single day. And so it's hard work. It's not rocket science, but it is a science. And it is something that you have to learn, and you have to understand the nuances, and you have to understand the chemistry that happens between donors and mission and opportunity and things like that. So I think it's something that if you, people that sometimes stick their toe in the water and say, hey, I'll try that fundraising thing. They might have been in sales or marketing in the private sector. And they said, hey, that would be fun to do that over there in something that is doing good, that is a good cause. And some make it and some don't. And I think it's because for me especially, has God really anointed you for this? Has he really called you to it? Has he given you a passion? One of my early mentors, I remember he told me, he said, listen, when I first got into fundraising, he said, Tim, you're going to be told no about 8 times to every one time you're going to be told yes. Do you have what it takes to be told no that many times? Well, I didn't know that I did or not in those days. I ended up being a dad to 6 kids, and I was told no all the time. And so I learned how to put up with that. But no, so it's just it can be kind of a grind at times. But the real benefit of seeing when donors connect with a great mission, and we watch that synergy happen between mission and resources is really what kind of keeps me going every day.
Awesome. Well, let's dig into it.
All right. Well, cool. Well, listen, I think the subject today is building a major donor program. So for me, I always start with team building. I think when you look at building a program of any type, what are the qualities of the team that you want to build around you? And I have always started there. I believe that if you are a really good team builder, you can be an average fundraiser and still succeed. Okay, because putting the right people in the right seats on the bus is really an important process. And so for me, I've really been excited and drawn to some of the content that's been written by Patrick Lencioni. He wrote a great book many years ago called 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And those 5 things are really the kind of characteristics to avoid, when you're building a team. Now, some of you may be building a team that people are compensated to come and join your organization. You may be a mid-size or a larger charity. You may be building a team of people that can only work part-time, or you may even be building a team of volunteers that are going to assist you. Some of you may be listening to this webinar here and watching this webinar today and say, hey, I'm a one person show. I'm a one person shop. And as I look at these characteristics, wherever you are today and wherever you're going, these are great things to think about. And
Okay.
Lencioni says it this way. He basically says, avoid these kinds of characteristics in team members. And he says, one, where there's an absence of trust, somebody that just cannot come in and trust the people that they're working with, and be in a high trust culture. Two, that they have fear of conflict. I think the greatest experiences I've had as a leader is in contentious conversations with my team.
Interesting.
And there's a gentleman who's a CDO of a $120 million charity today that worked for me for many years. And we would be in our office together. He's a lot younger than me, and he started working for me when he was very young. And we would just battle over ideas. He was young and ambitious and hungry, and he was smart, and he was chasing these opportunities, and he would throw things at me that were unproven. And I would just challenge him. Sometimes we'd walk out of my office, and the staff that would be outside the office would have tears in their eyes. Like, why are you guys fighting? And we'd say, oh, we're not fighting. We're just starting to communicate, because out of conflict resolution, we were able to form ideology and purpose. So someone who's afraid of that just runs from contentious conversation is, you don't want those people in your team. The third thing that Patrick talks about here is lack of commitment. Are they really committed to your mission? Do you have people that wake up in the morning and they care a lot about your mission? If you're in an organization that is trying to alleviate poverty, are they individuals that get up and really think about that? Are they trying to evangelize? Are they trying to distribute Bibles, or what? Are those the things that really kind of grab them? The fourth thing was people that are avoiding accountability. Are they willing to be checked up on? Are they willing to report? Are they willing to give, to take feedback from either you as a coach, as a mentor, as a leader, as a manager, as a boss, however you describe yourself? Are people really going to respond to excellent accountability? And then finally, I think the most important thing in major donor work is are they attentive to results? If they're not, I'll be honest with you, being in a major donor program and running around meeting with donors is a great way to create, a lot of smoke and mirrors without, we're meeting, we're having conversations, I'm talking about the organization. But at the end of the day, you have to measure that.
Sure.
And so how are we doing on the results? Lencioni goes on and he says in his book, The Ideal Team Player, he just says these three things. He says, when you're looking for a team player, and again, I qualify this not as necessarily as just an employee, are they humble, are they hungry, and are they smart? And they can have, they need to have all three of these things. They can be hungry and smart, but they're not that humble. And they could be humble and smart, but not that hungry. So, humility, it's a hard thing to measure, because about the time you think you're humble, but maybe you've crossed over, But are they hungry? Do you just get up every day and you're just after it and you're driven to see the results? And are you smart? I mean, do you just have the smarts to say, have I really looked at every corner of this relationship? For example, sometimes when you're dealing with a major donor, we often hear a donor say no who has not said no. They've said something like, wait. They've said, hey, I need to pray about this. Hey, I need to talk to my spouse about this. I need to go back and look at our funding about this. But often as a representative of an organization, we hear them say no, although they've not said no. You just got to be smart about things and pick up on the things that is a donor really pushing you away, when sometimes you're just saying, listen, I just need more information.
Right.
And so on team building, I just think that if you can build great teams of whether those are prayer warriors, whether those are volunteers or staff members, then it really will give you the foundation to being able to build, a great program.
So let's pause here on this team piece for just a second. And you touched on the fact that we're talking to our audience is a variety of folks. We've got one-man shops all the way to large organizations.
Right.
Especially to that lower size organization, sometimes there's no option right now in their current situation of who their team is. Either they have their team of volunteers and that's who they've got, or they have limited resources to hire new folks, or for whatever reason, we know, and especially in those smaller ministry-minded organizations, you've got able bodies who are there and they're passionate, and that is your staff. They may or may not possess they may have some of these dysfunctions, and they may or may not possess all of these key attributes. What do you do when you've got who you've got, at least for the foreseeable future? How do I continue to move forward with the team that I have?
Yeah, well, I think you start with the fact that, there's this great passage in the New Testament when Jesus' disciples are kind of abandoning him,
Mm-hmm.
and it talks about Jesus coming to the garden to pray, and
Mm-hmm.
he came alone.
Mm-hmm.
And I often think about that passage, that's how it feels in fundraising sometimes, is that when you come in, you're the one, you're the only one.
Sure.
And you may even be on a large team and you feel like you're very isolated and alone. So sometimes I think just start out by trying to find that one person. Just look for that one individual that can resonate with what you're trying to do. And that may be another staff person. That may be a person, if you're in a larger organization, it may be someone outside your department even.
Okay.
That really just can kind of resonate with you. That person, maybe it's just somebody who says, listen, I'm going to show up every Tuesday for one purpose, and that's to pray for you and to pull for you that you will succeed. I've been in that place in my career where, I've sat at my desk and I've asked myself, what do I do next?
Right.
What do I do now? I feel like this is, it's on me, and I have no idea where to turn. So usually I start by praying,
right?
Because that's
always a good answer.
That's a good place to turn to. But I think at times there's a real opportunity there as well, just to say, where is that first name? Where's that first volunteer? Where's that first, kind of prayer support person going to come from? And it's amazing. It's amazing if you have a good cause, because that's important, that it makes your cause does make sense to people that you're talking to. And if you have something that's very meaningful to people, and it's something that people believe should be done, before long, you'll begin to build that audience. And that audience may be 3, 5, 10 people to start with. Yeah. But, I would just say, these are all characteristics. And I would come to those last 3. Are you hungry? Are you really hungry enough to succeed,
right,
to work through the hardships? I came to a ministry here in Kansas City years ago. I'd been in fundraising for a while, and they had been recruiting me. It was a place that I actually grew up in. It was a youth ministry here in Kansas City, and they brought me in they wanted to shift their development program a new direction. It was about 25 years ago.
Okay.
And I remember this organization had been built on the backs of $25 and $30 a month donors.
Right.
They've never really talked about major funding. I was a major funding guy. I was the relationship guy. I felt like, you get in a relationship with people, share the vision, people's money will follow their passion and all that. And I'd go out, and door after door after door, people were just slamming. I couldn't get appointments. Nobody would meet with me. So I just did cold calls, and they just kept slamming the door in my face. And then finally we saw a little bit of traction. And it was months, and I'd go home and I'd be discouraged, and I'd just say, what did I had a great job before this,
right?
And I was working in Scottsdale, Arizona. It was beautiful.
The weather was great.
And, but then, all of a sudden you just saw that traction and that shift. And then it just kind of took off from there, and we built a great really great program over the next, 4 or 5 years.
You had to be really hungry, really
Yeah.
determined.
You have to be. You
Yeah.
just cannot be. I don't think good fundraisers are easily knocked off their game. I don't think we're discouraged easily. I don't think that I don't think we give other people control of our happiness and our security. We say, no, I know who I am.
Right.
I know what I want to do. I know what we need to accomplish in this organization. And by golly, I'm going to stay on track till we get there.
Well, and Tim, I think it goes back to what you said earlier, when this is a calling, and I feel like, at least in my experience, I felt like I'm pleasing the Lord here. That's what's driving me, because I believe in this cause and I believe he's called me to it. And I will continue to get up every day and be hungry and focus.
Yeah,
on
but
this
let me say one other thing about team
Yeah.
building, and then we can jump to some of the more functional things in a donor program. I don't think team building is just about me and the group that I work with, but it's also about the people that manage me. It's the people that lead organizations. And I think it needs to be about management as well. So if you're somebody who says, hey, I'm thinking about joining a charity as a fundraiser, check your management out as well. Are they team-oriented people? Do they have humility? There's a lot of talk today. It discourages me somewhat. Over all of my career, I've been at this for well over 30 years, but only in the last few years do you hear the terms like narcissism being applied to leaders. And I would encourage you to examine leaders before you go to work for them. So if you're thinking about becoming a major donor officer, if you're thinking about working, make sure they possess those capabilities as well, that they are humble people, that they are doing it for the right purpose and the right reason, and that they're leading from a basis of humility and hunger and things like that as well. And so I think that's really important.
Great.
Okay, functionally, here's one of the questions that I'm asked the most is, where can I find major donors and major donor prospects? And I can't imagine, I can't even begin to tell you how many people have reached out to me over my years to say, hey, Tim, who do you know that you can introduce me to? And they all have this mindset. And this mindset is this: if I could meet that one person with all their millions of dollars, they will solve all of my problems. And so I've had the privilege to raise money, to ask for large sums of money, to see those large sums of money contributed. And so people reach out and they'll say, hey, will you introduce me to so-and-so? Because they come, and I always tell them, so, well, first of all, no, I can't do that, because they are connected to a particular ministry that I serve or I work with. But here's what I want to tell them: that your best major donor prospects are already in your donor base. They're just lurking around in there, kind of waiting for you.
Will you say that again? I think we've gotten even a couple questions, Tim, on the Q&A, and I think that is exactly right. We're always looking outside, thinking somebody else is out there that would be the answer.
Yeah, and that's true. There are other people out there, and there are those that we need to acquire, to bring them into the organization. But I think the best work you can do is look at your own donor base. The ability to engage and retain a person who's already giving to you is much easier and much more effective and more cost effective than trying to work to gain somebody who isn't giving to you. So I put on the screen here just your typical donor pyramid, where at the bottom you'll see, where you have prospects who get involved with you first as a one-time donor, and then we elevate them or lift them to repeat general donors, so they'll give once or twice a year maybe, and then we try to get those donors to give to as monthly donors. So they may be $45 a month donors, giving to you on a regular basis, and they, we're dinging their credit card or their bank account. And we try to lift those to what we call really multi-year sustaining donors, more commonly known today as mid-level donors. Now, every organization has their own levels here.
Yes.
So for some, $1,000 may be a major gift, not a mid-level gift. This is just kind of a placeholder of sorts. And then you have your large annual donors. These are your major donors who are going to make a significant contribution to your. These are the people we're looking for and building our program around. And then, of course, capital donors for building buildings, things like that, or your estate donors. So my belief, if you look at that line where is above the multi-sustaining donors and go down, my belief in almost every donor file that I've ever looked at over the years is that about 20% of those people that are giving at those levels have the capacity to contribute at a more significant level. And so often we buy into the idea that is a $100 donor when they're really I think the best way to explain it is this: know your donor's capacity and then understand their vision for your organization. Okay. So if I have the capacity, say, to give $10,000 to your organization, but I'm giving you $1,000 every year, then what you realize is I don't have a $10,000 vision. I have a $1,000 vision. My vision does not equate to my capacity yet. So what you as the organization need to do is work with me to really grow my vision so that I would have an interest to give at a higher capacity because my capacity level is there. Okay, so this seems a little bit like a cart and horse thing for me. Because how do I know what your capacity is? If I'm the development officer and I've met with you and you've given me a gift of $1,000, how do I know that's not a major gift to you as the donor? Yeah, and that's where, the next screen here, we actually talk about measurements, and this is just a little sample chart that I threw in here, but, take time to measure your donors. And I think when you look in here, this is a sample chart that I threw in here. So let's look up here at the major donor. This organization has, in 2017, had 179 donors that were giving they gave 341 gifts. They gave a total of over $3 million, an average gift of almost $9,000. So that was their average gift of their donors. Those are easy to spot, okay, because they're already giving. But if you begin to look down, I'm more interested in the 570 donors that gave 1,000 to 5,000, and the general donors. There's 1,590 of those who aggregately gave almost $500,000 at an average gift of almost $180 if you look under the general donor side. Now, my question is, where do I find the donors in those two selects? Because inside there are probably a lot of these donors that can give at these higher levels, but they just are not giving. So that's where you need to analyze. I think I do. If you have some budget, there are some tools that you can purchase to help you screen the names of individuals. Today, there's so much information available to us to be able to examine, what is the wealth and what is the giving capacity of a donor. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? I'm sorry to interrupt. We have gotten several, I'm hearing your questions, or I'm seeing your questions, folks, and I know we've gotten several questions about Wealth Engine resources, and are those really worth the money? How do I convince my board it's worth the money? Can you talk about that for just a little bit? Yeah, Wealth Engine's a great tool. We've used it for many, many years. I think you need to be equipped on how to interpret the information. Okay. Because what Wealth Engine will give you their rankings, SB1, SB2, SB3, and they'll rank these donors for you. And but that, it's just a capacity number. I think what it does, okay, if you have Wealth Engine and you had a file like the one that's on the screen here today, I would screen every single person in your file. Okay. And then out of that, you'll probably come up with 3 or 4 segments of donors. And then out of those donors, I would take it a step further. What's their frequency of giving to us so far? How long have they been on our file? I would do some basic real estate examination, and what kind of neighborhoods are their homes in. I would do some, Wealth Engine can show you other projects that they give to. Is our mission aligned with the things that they are currently contributing toward? So Wealth Engine, I think the problem that a lot of folks have with Wealth Engine, and I think I sit on the board of a few charities, and I think the problem I would have as a board member is that we're leaning on that program to answer all of our questions.
Right.
And all that program will do is really identify the pool of individuals. And then I think from there, it's going to take getting on the telephone or trying to make contact with these individuals and then validating the information that a program like that gives to you. It still comes back to a lot of hard work by us as individuals. But it would take a file, say, of 10,000 names and show you the best 1,500 of those names to really focus on.
So for some folks that are listening today, that Wealth Engine tool might be a next step for them. Mm-hmm. For some folks that are listening, that's way out of their scope. Mm-hmm. That's either not practical for them right now, or they're just not ready for it. Mm-hmm. How some of that work can be done just by getting to know the donors that you have already. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So I would say survey your donors. I would look at, I think there are a lot of things you can do that are there are a lot of tools that are available to you out there. Today we have so much available to us just through the internet, right?
Right.
We have the ability to search and to find things. I always tell my younger people that I'm training. Okay, I've been at this a long time. I'm not going to tell you how old I am. But, I've been at this a long time. But I always tell younger people, if I had I'm holding a smartphone right now. If I'd have had this in the 90s, I think I'd have changed the world.
Yeah.
I carried like these old kind of egg crates of notebooks in my trunk everywhere.
Right.
And I had to carry paper everywhere I went because that's the way I kept up with information. Mm-hmm. And today, with something that I can stick in my pocket, I can hold all of this information. Yeah. Well, the same way you have the ability to search. Mm-hmm. You have the ability to mine just general information, and you can find out a lot about people just by using Google.
Right.
If you don't have the resources.
Sure.
I don't believe that a lack of tools like a Wealth Engine or something like that is really going to keep you from finding out some basic information about your donors. There's a lot of free resources out there. I used to, when technology was first coming on, I was actually in a startup. I was in a startup organization in those years when we first started getting things like, and I remember just getting an address and putting it in Zillow.
Yes.
And trying to look at and try to understand just from a real estate basis what kind of home that person, at least they believe that they could afford because they were living in that neighborhood.
That could be a little tricky too.
Yeah. And where you aren't doing, where a Wealth Engine program is going to go much deeper. But I would just, I think there are a lot of tools, that are out there available to us today. The number one way to really get to more people in your file, though, is just to see who do they know at your major donor or mid-levels already, and seek referrals and seek relationships and seek, I would look in that, in this example here, again, every organization has their own tiers, but for this organization, I would look at that 5,000 and above group and say, are you aware of anybody else in, that would care about our organization? Maybe they already gift our organization, that you could help engage them and help refer them. And, two things happen out of that. When a person is willing to reach in and help you with that, they're actually demonstrating to you there's probably a higher level for them to step to as well. But I think use the tools, use the resources that you have.
Sure.
And that's the thing that I think is is most valuable. I mean, if you're wanting to purchase a new house today, all you have to do is put the address in that Google line and that search line, and you'll find out all kinds of things about that home. Same thing with people. You know. Now, someone like me, it's very hard to research because I have a very common name, and you know, in town here over the years, as I grew up in this town, when I was first starting out, there was a really crooked lawyer that had the same name as my name, and I used to get associated with them all the time. Always had to introduce myself as, "Hey, I'm Tim Smith. I'm not the lawyer.
You're right.
I'm
the other Tim Smith.
I'm the charity guy." So, but anyway, my point is there are so many tools, and they're really, and you use them every day. It's your computer, it's your iPhone, it's your iPad, and just by trying to dive into that information, and then there are other programs. You know, Wealth Engine is kind of like the top Cadillac kind of a thing, but you know, almost any donor management system that organizations use has some kind of a wealth analytic to it today. So there are very few donor management systems. So even if you're using some of the lower cost things where you're paying like a monthly fee and it's an online system that's kind of helping you care for your donors, you know, and your relationship management. Almost all of those have some kind of, now they're not as robust as Wealth Engine, but they have some kind of a tool in there or an application or a module that you can purchase that will help you analyze that wealth capacity of your donors.
So that might be an initial step before jumping.
I think so. I think, again, you have to look at where you are, and you know, where you are is very possibly, you know, at a small organization, or you're building your very first donor file, or maybe you've stepped into an organization that's had maybe some rough years of history. So where they've been in the past is not where they are today. So you're having to step back and then go forward. I think you know, just look at the resources that you have at your fingertips now.
Okay. Let's look at this. I know we've gotten a question. I want to look at the sheet for just a second, if you don't mind, Tim. How you have this right now, you've got those mid-level donors, kind of anything 1,000 to right at 5,000, and then major donors 5,000 plus. And I know you said this is sort of relative, it changes for organization, but is it really? How would you define a major donor? Because I know as organizations get larger and gifts might get larger, my donation might be major to me. So is there some kind of threshold of what is accepted broadly as a major or significant donor?
Yeah, so this file here this is an actual file of an organization, okay? And it's about, they are generating just under 3 million. Well, let's see what they have here. They're generating just under $5 million a year. So that kind of gives you a sense of how they bucket their donors and their $4 to $5 million organization. I do think you have to you see where you are and start there. So when I came to this youth ministry here in Kansas City, I actually considered a major donor $500 because they had never really pushed major gifts here. They had a few major donors, but it never been a priority. And so we went down to $500. A mid-level gift was like $100 to $250. And so now over time, that major donor became a donor of, let's say, north of $2,000. But we had to start where we were. And so I think you have to understand who you are today. And what does that file look like today? And where to start. I think as you begin to grow, this is a pretty standard breakdown of a organization. If you're a organization, say from $500,000 to $100 million, most of those organizations will bucket their donors with mid-levels in the 1,000 to 5,000 and a major donor 5,000 plus.
So I think that's a key piece of information, because I know in different ministries that I've been involved with, sometimes I've always kind of advised, let's just see where your natural breaks are. but to understand that these are kind of common thresholds, that 1,000 to 5,000, above 5,000, because I think sometimes those donors have certain expectations when they give at that level. A relational expectation, not necessarily something else. Numbers of touches by that organization. So that you're saying that's fairly standard regardless of size of organization.
Yeah, it is. I think it is. And I'll tell you this as well. I don't want to get stuck here, but it's always served me so well in my career. And that is just to understand the donor and their real estate. And so if I'm trying to identify donors that are already in my file and one of the best fundraising experiences I had in my life was somebody who bought a $35 product from our organization. Now in those days, we were screening every name, product buyers or donors.
Sure.
Well, this $35 product buyer popped up that they actually lived in a very luxurious neighborhood on the East Coast.
Interesting.
I picked up the phone. I called him and I said, hey, this is Tim Smith from XYZ organization. I'd like to come by and see you next time I'm in town. He goes, when are you going to be here? I said, I'll be there in 2 weeks. And he said, great. I could tell he was kind of suspicious.
Sure.
His tone of voice, and he was a little snarky on the phone, and he goes, yeah. He says, you come by and see me, And so 2 weeks later, I come to the gate. They have to let me into the neighborhood. Wow. And I come to the home, and he sits down with me, and I'm asking him, say, what caused you to buy that product? He said, oh, well, I was watching something, and it was offered, and it was something I really was interested in. He goes, but tell me something. He goes, do you come out and visit every person that buys a $35 product? And, there's that moment when you're raising money, where you just have to have courage to be totally transparent.
Right.
And I remember leaning forward and looking at him in the eye, I go, no, only those that live in $2 million houses. And he leaned back in his chair and he started clapping his hands, and I thought, well, he could throw me out the door right now. But what he did, he said, listen, he was kind of funny. He says, you're going to be a big problem for me. I know. I go, I certainly hope so. And we had a long relationship he was very generous from that day forward. And he did give to his capacity to that organization. Wow. And so I just have always felt like that's a safe place, and it's an easy place to try to associate value. Now, it will backfire on you as many times. I mean, I love to tell that story because it's a real winning story, right. But I have probably 10 of those stories that didn't go so well as all. But it's a great place to kind of just say, okay, I don't have all the resources. I can't buy the big screen engines and all this kind of thing, but I do have the ability to kind of match real estate.
Interesting.
I think that's something that anybody can do.
So that's a good takeaway for all of those of you listening, that fancy tools are great, but sometimes just a little work on Google or Zillow in this case.
Yeah,
will
common sense.
Help you.
You trust your instincts.
Very good. All right, let's keep going.
So anyway, that's some of the things. Now, the other things are just make sure you keep measuring. So there are dashboards that if you have a donor database system that will pay attention to the movement with your donors and when they, what time of year or what time of the month they are giving, how often they give. The file I just showed you was really a concern. The concern I had on that file when I first analyzed it was that their donors gave an average of less than 2 gifts per year. Okay. And so they were doing a great job of acquiring donors, but a lousy job of keeping donors. And so dashboards are just like ways, what are the buckets of information? For me, I like to see frequency of giving. I like to see average gift. I like to see largest single gift. I like to see, continuity. So if they came on, say, in 2008, have they given every year through this year, or are there years that they've stopped giving? And those are things that I just like to say, which we call dashboards, that I can just look at really quickly and say, okay, how are these donors performing? Scorecards are a great way of just saying, how are donors performing against the strategy that I've put out there to engage them. I mean, it may sound like a great strategy or feel like a great strategy in my head,
Right.
And it may have been something that sounded good when I spoke it to my board, but is it getting the kind of results that I want to get? On major donors, the most important thing you can do is build a marketing plan on every single donor, because I think when I have taught at conferences, usually at the lunch break, I'll just say, hey, listen, when you come back from lunch, I want you to share with me your marketing plan for your major donors, and I'll share with you mine.
Uh-huh.
And so almost every time someone will come at me at lunch and say, hey, what's your marketing plan? Oh, I'll tell you in a few minutes. So when I bring it up, they'll give a marketing plan. And when they ask me what my marketing plan, my response is always, well, which donor?
Uh-huh.
Because I think where we get caught is that we think that all of these major donors are responding to the same methodology that we have been putting in front of them. And where many donors, they need unique, there's some donors who just need to see numbers, like that chart I just showed. Others need to see videos, and they're more emotive in how they make decisions. Others need to hear stories. Some need to get their hands dirty. They need to go visit, get their feet on the ground. And so create, when you think about a major donor, so if I have a caseload, say of 80 donors, I should have 80 plans of how to work with them. And then, understanding what are your key indicators, what are the indicators, these are common terminology, KPIs of, what are the things that our donors are doing, how are they responding that are telling me that they are engaged, so maybe this donor only gives between October 1st and December 31st, what are they indicating to me throughout the year? They're still going to do that, so, and just kind of plugging in. Or maybe I have a really great mega donor and they give a lot every single month.
Okay.
So do they miss a month? Are they asking questions like, hey, what happened on that last project? And you realize, oh my gosh, I never came back and reported to them on how we used their last gift, that type of thing. And then just really focus on your outcomes. Just every day, I'm all about, when I'm asking a board to agree to spend a certain amount of money on my ideas, how are those ideas translating to great outcomes for the organization? So those are great. Those are excellent tools.
Can we sit on these dashboards and tools for just a second? And your marketing plan for each of your 80 major donors, it was a lot to me when you first said it. I thought, oh my gosh, a marketing plan for each of those folks. That sounds like a lot, especially because my vantage point is that I was still managing events and I'm managing our regular communication to our entire donor base. So having a specific donor marketing plan for each of these key people is kind of intimidating, but it doesn't have to be. Right? It's really just getting to know the donors and getting to know their behavior, their giving behavior.
Yeah. So who's in relationship with that individual? And it's not as much work as you think.
Right.
Especially, it's a little bit of work to get started, but as you get engaged and get down the road and you journey with that donor, those things become very obvious. I always think there's a intersection point between the donor's intent to give and the mission of the organization. And once you understand where they intersect, then you know how to market to them and how to talk to them. It's a little bit of work on the front end.
So don't get hung up on the terminology of a marketing plan for each of these people as much as the overall idea, just to get to know those folks. Okay, very good.
All right, so moving on. So then what is your engagement strategy? So these are things that I think you need to be, as you identify donors, as you identify people, what is the problem that you are trying to solve? Your program, people say, how do we build a major donor program? Well, you build it by attracting major donors. And the way you attract major donors, you're very clear about 4 things. 1 is the problem you're solving. 2 is what is your solution as an organization to that problem. I worked for Food for the Hungry for several years. I was their CDO. And we believe that our core focus was to alleviate poverty worldwide. And then what was our solution? Well, we were building communities in the hardest, most impoverished places around the world. They
Right.
still are today. They're doing great
Right.
work. And so it's very clear, this is the problem, this is our solution.
Yep.
And then strategically, this is how we're seeing things change. And so we would be able to actually monitor, evaluate, and show the donor. And then the fourth thing is, what do we want the donor to do? We have to be clear. We have to be concise about what exactly, if we're asking that donor, say, for $5,000 or $10,000 or $100,000, what are the specific outcomes that we think are going to come from that contribution? And so I think as donors engage, people will follow their passions, and then finally speak their language. Don't cut corners on presentations.
Mm-hmm.
Be willing, if you got to spend a little bit of extra money, spend it on a quality presentation that really helps your donor understand your message and what you're trying to deliver.
Yep.
I've had so many donors, when I've sat with them or I've surveyed them, they've said, listen, Tim, let me show you these presentations. And I don't know what they want me to do.
Right.
And I would agree with them. I've read those and everything. So be very concise. How do we thank and acknowledge the donor? How does that donor, before the donor trusts the organization, they've got to trust you, the representative of that organization.
Mm-hmm.
So are you a trustworthy person? I think in the donor relationship space, in the major donor space, trust takes up about 80% of everything
Wow.
you do. Okay, because they want to know that not just the organization is trustworthy, but you are trustworthy.
Right.
And so keep your promises. If you say, hey, listen, I'm going to send you that report, send it to them. I'm going to follow up with you. Make sure you follow up. And then third is just make sure your case is crystal clear.
Mm-hmm.
Be very clear. And for me, I used to like to practice this on people. Just run it. I would just say, hey, here's my ask of this particular guy tomorrow.
Right.
Does it make sense to you? And I was
Right.
willing to let, program people in the organization beat me up over. You say, no, it doesn't make sense to me. And make sure it's crystal clear. And then don't forget to ask. Okay. Believe it or not, in major donor work, we're so relational in our methodology today that it's very easy to say, we just take it up to that point, and we want the donor to do all the work.
Right.
Okay. And we got to be willing to still ask for the contribution. I had an old boss who used to say, remember, you got to ask for the order.
Right.
He was an old business guy.
I was going to say, back to the sales comparisons.
Yeah.
So that was actually a question that someone has asked this morning is, what are the key components of that ask?
Mm-hmm.
What do I need to include?
Well, I think this to me is a cycle here of, thank, build trust, compelling case statement, asking, and then you're back to thanking and acknowledging. It's kind of a cyclical thing. For me, I think it's very simple. If I was asking you for a donation today, I would say, Kristen, based on the information that I've shared with you today, is there anything about our organization that you would still have questions? Because I would like you to talk to me. Okay.
Sure.
I would like you to tell me what you're thinking.
Okay.
And so, okay. And then, so based on that, would you be willing to consider a donation of X amount of dollars to help us feed the hungry, to help us distribute Bibles, and be very specific and very, very clear? And I think if you've done to me, a compelling ask is a product of a good relationship,
Yes.
of a good case statement.
Mm-hmm.
Does the donor feel acknowledged? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The asking, to me, asking is easy.
Okay.
It's all the other stuff that's hard.
Right.
Because if you take, it could be, my belief is when a donor met with me, they're 70% down the road to give.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they don't want to give, they don't really want to tell me no.
Right.
And so when they agree to meet, there are very few people I've met with that did not eventually give to the causes that I've talked to them about.
So here's a quick question for you about the execution of that ask. And you're saying, would you be willing to give $5,000 toward that project, whatever you've presented? Do you ask for one amount? Do you give them kind of 3 buy-in level options?
That's not how well I know them.
Okay.
I think when you're starting out and you don't know a lot about, a particular donor and where they are. I think a giving table is really good. So just create a table that says, for us to accomplish this, we need 10 donors that can give at this level, and 5 donors at this level, and maybe 20 donors at this level. And I would probably just say, Kristen, where would you see yourself on that? And so I might have seen you at a much higher level. Usually I do.
Right.
And, but you're going to really set that bar. And then I know where to work from in the future.
Very good. Okay. So we've had one question, was not on my radar really to engage here, but it's come up a couple times. So I want to make sure we get your perspective on it. Where do corporate donors play into this? Because my experience has been very much relational, individually, not so corporately. So where do our corporate partnerships come into play here?
Well, I think do good research. Research corporations, it's not very complicated to understand what kinds of things that they give to. Mm-hmm. And then I think just same kind of thing, is there somebody that's currently giving to you that has a relationship to a particular corporation? Mm-hmm. So one of my stops in my career, we did a thing called workplace giving, where people were giving. They had some kind of matching program, and so when we saw those might come in at $100, but then knowing that we had employees in that company that were giving, we would try to track back and say, okay, what is their corporate strategy of philanthropy? What are the things that they give to? First thing, if you're a faith-based organization, which I believe probably most of our people listening today are, mm-hmm. What is the first thing is, do they give to faith-based organizations? Right. And because that's a really tough hurdle to get over. Absolutely. And if they don't, then I would dismiss those prospects and move on right away. Okay.
Very good. One last question. You talk about in your book a lot, just the ministry really of this donor development and the relationship aspect. Yep. Any closing thoughts on that, just to encourage our development folks?
Yeah, I think it's really important to build a culture of fundraising in your organization. And so I'm working with an organization right now, and they have signs throughout their building that say everyone does development. And what they're trying to send across is it's not a department, it's not a group of people down in the basement with no windows, smiling and dialing every day.
That's right.
But everybody does it. And I think the hardest work that we do sometimes is to create those bridges between those that are doing, say, programs or frontline ministry and those that do fundraising. And I think when you can build those bridges and you can create that kind of synergy, then the whole organization owns it. And some of the best organizations that are raising really significant dollars from major donors, they're doing it not necessarily through development people. Right. I think a really smart development person will say, who's the best person to talk to that donor? Oh, that should be our COO, because they have so many operational questions. Right. Now, I can facilitate and manage that relationship. So I need to get that COO on board, say, hey, this is how you can contribute. The organizations that do that, number one, they're healthier. Sure. Because there's a team culture that pervades everything that they talk about and everything that they do.
I love that.
So yeah, I talk about ministry and marketing a lot, and most of those have been siloed in organizations. Mm-hmm. They need to be integrated big time. Yeah.
Yep. Everybody does development. I love that. We need more signs like that in our organization. Thanks, Tim. That was great. Hopefully you guys all found that to be practical, useful information that you can literally just put into practice even this week. So, Tim, thanks for taking your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for your experience and expertise.